Hi, I'm Mark Bloomberg and I work at the School of Forestry at the University of Canterbury. Today we're on Woodside, which is a 120 hectare farm forest in North Canterbury, owned and managed by John and Rosalie Wardle. And I'm going to talk about the way they manage the 30 hectares of radiata pine that is part of the property's forest estate. We've made this video to show some of the features of this operation, to show that it does produce wood, and to show what it might look like for those who are interested. Now, we're standing amongst the earliest plantings here, planted from 1973-74 onwards. In the early 2000s, John and Rosalie had the option of clear felling in the conventional manner and decided against it. John had considerable experience with selective harvesting in the native black beech, which is also part of their forest, and he did wonder if this could be applied to their radiata pine. And that's just what they did. So since 2002-2003, every 1 to 2 years, logging gangs have come in here and partially harvested on what's called a target diameter basis. In other words, every tree that is larger than 60 centimetres diameter is selected and removed carefully, trying to minimise the damage to the surrounding trees, extracted, and this means that you've got a constant and ongoing flow of logs, about 20 cubic metres per hectare per year from this forest. So just a little bit about the layout of the operation. The advantage of this form of harvesting is that you don't need large skids, because a relatively small volume is coming out from each hectare of forest. So essentially it's roadside harvesting where the logs are extracted using a skidder. They're brought to a roadside where the excavator and a static delimber remove the branches. Cross-cutting is manual. The excavator then stacks the logs, and again, because of the relatively small volume, the actual log stacks aren't large. This system depends on good roading. The road network through John's forest is up to logging truck standard. So conventional logging trucks will come in, be loaded by the loader, and production currently under these good conditions running at about 60 cubic metres or 60 tonnes per day, which is not too bad. It's only a two-man crew, 2 machines, the excavator loader and the skidder. What helps the operation to keep moving from a production point of view is that every tree that's harvested is a large tree. So every tree that's felled represents 3 tonnes on the ground. Every tree that is extracted is about 3.5 tonnes. You only have to be felling and extracting somewhere around the vicinity of 20 or maybe a few more trees per day, and you've made that target of production. So the actual cost of extraction and processing isn't that much greater than conventional clear fell harvesting in a mature radiata pine stand. The economics of this system is not quite as profitable as a conventional clear fell regime. Main reason for that is that you are delaying your harvest, and time costs money, and any delay in harvesting is always going to result in reduced profitability. But the reduction is not that great, and the advantage of course is that you're retaining a forest structure over the entire forest. You don't have the kind of environmental issues that are associated with clear fells, and particularly large clear fells. You don't have the soil and water conservation issues. You don't have the big skids, the big accumulations of slash. You don't have the visual impact, because essentially the forest from a distance certainly doesn't look any different from any other forest, undisturbed forest. Where visual or soil and water or other environmental values are important, I think what John and Rosalie have proved is that radiata pine is a flexible enough species. You can successfully apply selection harvesting. You can successfully regenerate and create a second crop. And so at the end, you have what is called continuous cover forestry. There is always green on the land, there is always a canopy, and particularly for a small grower, there is always a constant supply of wood amounting to an annual income. rather than the kind of boom and bust. I mean, there is 30 hectares of radiata pine here. If it had all been clear felled at the age of 30, there would have been a very large flow of cash for a while, and then that would have been the end of it, and we'd simply be looking now at a 10 or 15 year old regrowing stand of radiata pine that only ever represented the cost of silviculture. Whereas with this system, there is an annual income that represents a living income for the landowners. John's always been adamant in carrying out this system that it's not for every forest grower in New Zealand, and he's very reluctant to say that it's something that he would recommend for anybody. It's a system that needs to be adopted by landowners who really want to do something different to the conventional clear felling. I think what John's demonstrated is that you can have a highly profitable and productive radiata pine plantation without the need to clear fell. We grow radiata pine because it is profitable, because it is fast growing, because it produces a wood that the world has a demand for. We can manage radiata pine differently to the conventional way, and in the process we can get away from a lot of the environmental issues. A lot of people ask about what happens after the selection logging occurs. What we've found is that the regeneration does occur, particularly on warm and sunny faces such as the one we're on right now. The other problem that's frequently experienced with regeneration of radiata pine on clear felling sites is that you get very, very dense regeneration, many tens of thousands of seedlings per hectare, and this becomes a real problem from a point of view of needing to thin that out down to a suitable crop density. We've found that the regeneration in these selection sites tends to be relatively sparse, just a few hundred or maybe 1,000 seedlings like this coming up per hectare. Some of them will be damaged or crushed by the felling and successive selection harvests, but in general we're able to get a decent regeneration crop. There's still ongoing regeneration occurring. There's a small seedling down here. You will get a mixed age regeneration of radiata pine on some sites at least, and therefore you're in a position where your crop establishes itself with minimal intervention. The argument is made that the genetics of these seedlings represents no improvement over the parent trees. That's true to an extent, but then on the other hand we find that in this environment the young seedlings grow straight, they have fine branches, they have good form, or there are enough good formed trees to have a crop. So some of the drive for improvement in tree quality through genetics is removed in this system, because you're growing older trees with stiffer wood. You've got the capacity to grow trees with good form. So you would have to ask, is the genetic improvement from a new planted crop absolutely necessary? And based on the crops that we're obtaining under this system, I would suggest we don't.